Hey guys, it's COREROSS and welcome to Busting Rainbow Six Siege. Today we are myth-busting the Thatcher Remaster. And we'll begin with the basics. So for the last 10 years, Thatcher has had EMP grenades. And he's essentially been the perfect character for a brand new player, especially if a friend is bringing them into the game. Because it's simply just throw some EMPs against this wall and your job is done. And looking back at it now with the hindsight of this remaster, it's quite interesting because, of course, he only has 3 EMP grenades. It's actually not that much. But now we have a more complex operator who is able to EMP 6 times, plus gather intel through solid walls. And his new gadget has quite an impressive range, as he's able to EMP and detect gadgets 10 meters in front of himself. This means he can now affect gadgets deeper into sight that normally he either wouldn't know were there or wouldn't be able to reach with his EMP grenade. And originally I thought the effect coming out of his new launcher was a cone where it's spread out over time, but it appears to actually be a 3.5 meter wide cylindrical shape that doesn't actually increase with distance. And that leads us into the first myth, and it was one of the first comments I got on my video about this new version of Thatcher. And that is simply, if you're playing as Bandit and you have your batteries spread out as far as possible so they're at either corner of reinforced walls, can Thatcher still EMP both of them at the same time? And the answer is yes. Even standing directly in front of the reinforced wall, you're able to hit both batteries at the same time, and I assume this is actually what dictated the width of the EMP effect this gadget actually has, as they probably wanted this to be easy for new players to do. But you can easily reposition yourself and come at this from different angles as well to make it even more central to your target and reticle. And be noted, I still do this mistake, which is that I back off from walls thinking I'm getting a wider attack because I still, in my brain, is thinking this is a cone going out, whereas it's just a cylinder. So you can be really up close and still hit the same things as you can when you're far away. Now let's talk about a new capability of this remastered Thatcher, and that is the intel gathering aspect. As his EMP launcher has a screen on it, and this will show all the electronic defender gadgets in front of him, with the smaller circle being the width of the EMP blast, so anything in that circle that's highlighted will get disabled. And just like the EMP blast, the scan is able to go out to 10 meters, so you can detect quite a lot of stuff. Now initially things just show up as unidentified circles on your scanner, and if you or your friendlies ping those gadgets, they will become identified on your scanner. But not only that, if you ping say one mute jammer, all the mute jammers get identified when you're scanning them. And of course, this is an entirely new aspect of Thatcher. It even works after he's fired off all his EMP shots. And as you can see, it also identifies people on their phones as well. So think very similar to that of IQ. And it is really an incredible amount of intel. Now when it comes to the gadget placement, so say we've got Bandit here, you'll notice that while Bandit is holding the battery, nothing is identified until he fully puts it down. And you cannot pre-disable the gadget that is in his hand, so Bandit here is still able to bandit trick against a Thatcher, but of course you're going to have to deal with 6 EMP shots coming off him, rather than the old 3 EMPs. But I think the big loser here is that of Kaid, as his electricals are very versatile, you can hide them quite easily, and really this new Thatcher is essentially, I think, the best counter that could have ever been designed to go against him. And it essentially eliminates any kind of Kaid tricking going forward. Now that was possible with the EMPs. You were able to just put them out in certain timings and you would easily be able to counter any kind of Kaid setup. But the problem was, if you did mess it up, or if there was some sort of curveball in there, like Tuberol was brought in alongside Kaid to help him, then you could potentially defeat those 3 EMP grenades. But with him having 6 shots now, you get yourself a second, maybe even third chance to go against the defenses. But where things get more interesting is that of Pulse and Vigil, because of course they have their gadgets on them and they can now be detected by Thatcher while he's on his device. And of course he's not exactly very lethal holding this EMP launcher thing, and you can just imagine the potential coordinated teams going after Pulses and Vigils with this new Thatcher. And one thing that is a massive advantage here is that with say IQ, who can also track these operators, it's a lot harder to do with her device, and it's all down to this device's interface. It's so much nicer and easier to track things and identify things than it is with IQ. Of course, I assume IQ is going to need some sort of remaster herself in the future. But Thatcher doing what I would consider to be a secondary role here for his gadget I believe is easier to do with him than it is with IQ, with that being her primary gadget. And it's not to say that IQ doesn't have some benefits. So for instance, she can ping enemy gadgets, identify them for the entire team, which is very handy. And I will also say she's a perfect combo with this new Thatcher, because both of them can be on the roof and she can be pinging all the gadgets and identifying them for Thatcher and then facilitating the team's next moves. But Thatcher by himself is very powerful with this remaster because he has the ability to disable stuff and detect stuff. So for instance, with Capcan, he has now become an extremely powerful counter. And if you do happen to have a soft wall between you and the gadget you're detecting, then you can line it up on the screen of your gadget to be perfectly in the middle. This means it's now aligned with your reticle and you can switch to your weapon and shoot it. Now another major change here is the interaction with Aruni, as her laser gates have had their interaction with EMPs changed. Now already Thatcher was a pretty good counter to Aruni's laser gates because he could disable them but they would come back online. Well, that's now being changed. All EMP effects affecting Aruni gates will now disable the gates for 15 seconds, the EMP effect, but after that they'll be disabled as if something was thrown through the lasers, resulting in you having to then wait an additional 30 seconds and then shoot the target to switch them back on. So an absolutely immense nerf to Aruni there. And this is one of those nerfs that I feel like they might have to pull back on in the future, kind of like they did with Daenerys, but certainly if this interaction with EMPs hangs around for a while or potentially forever, it's just going to be a no-brainer to zap every Aruni gate you see with Thatcher's EMP, because it will just eliminate that utility for a substantial amount of time. Now at this point in the video, you might be asking yourself, well, what is the actual weakness of Thatcher's gadget here? Everyone has some sort of downside, and to be honest, there isn't much with Thatcher here. And I think really there's only two minor things that actually make him overall weak. One is that, of course, he cannot have his weapon out while he's using his gadget, although I don't see that as a huge weakness because most of the time he's probably going to be on the other side of a reinforced wall or safely on the roof zapping down. However, there is a visual cue you should be looking out for as a defender, and that is actually where the EMP is coming from, as the launcher shoots out a fast purple orb, and this will actually let you know where it's coming from. So let's say you're defending the basement and these purple orbs are coming in through the ceiling, you know then that he is inside the building above you and you can get your roamers to go take him out. Now let's talk inconsistencies. So the developers are very much making a push to make things more consistent, and this video so far has been a perfect example of that. There's not been a single surprise here. If you know this thing can EMP and it can detect electronic gadgets, then you know 99% of what this gadget can do, and there's no surprises. I recently did a video on their change to mute, which is not a remaster or a rework, and it is far more complex, and it makes sense, but also in the same vein, it completely changes that operator's gadget interaction with almost everything. And there was a lot of surprise myths in that video, whereas in this video there's pretty much zilch. But let's talk about the interaction with actual player characters, because that's where the inconsistency gets lost, and we can definitely start busting a few myths. So first of all, you would think if you get hit by this EMP blast, you are going to get EMP'd. And the effects of that you would probably expect to be that your reticle disappears on 1x sites and you're not able to access stuff like your phone to use gadgets. But that is actually not the case. So if you're just standing there and you're not using any electronic gadgets, the EMP effect will actually have no impact on you whatsoever. But for some reason, as soon as you pull your phone out, then you're a target that can be EMP'd, resulting in you not being able to use your phone, and the reticle for your sight will switch off. Now I can totally imagine that when they put their phones away, it is going to some sort of Faraday cage, which would protect it from an EMP, totally possible. But then Dockaby wouldn't be able to call it. And then the sight switching off only when you have your phone out when you get EMP'd is a very odd choice. But I can understand maybe they just didn't want people getting EMP'd over and over again and getting annoyed by it. And then when it comes to the weapon sights being EMP'd, there has been a change, and that is that the 1X's will switch off as normal, but also the ACOGs and such will switch off as well. Now I'm pretty sure for an ACOG that's actually etched on the glass, so I don't believe you can switch it off in real life, but obviously they've decided to do this for the game mechanics. Now, like I say, the only reason your actual sight will get switched off with the new Thatcher Remaster is if you've got your phone out, and I assume that's probably not going to be the case for most players in the middle of a gunfight where the reticle is actually going to be important. So odd choice in those few different areas there. And those are actually some myths that are properly busted because they just aren't what you would expect. But talking about what you wouldn't expect, I have a doozy for you, and that is Clash. I think this will need to be changed because it is going to confuse the heck out of people. So obviously you can throw an EMP at Clash and disable her shield quite easily in the current version. However, in the new version, you can only disable her shield if it's active. This is whether it's on her person or deployed. It is a very unusual choice and I don't like it. And it really goes against what I think is a core value in this game on how EMPs are supposed to work. And as a result, I don't think this is good. And to clarify exactly what the interaction is here, is that if Clash has her shield, she cannot be detected on where her location is, which I think is fine. However, Thatcher is not able to EMP the shield unless it is using the electrical effect. If it is not, he cannot EMP it. It's the same if it's deployed as well. It's not detectable if the electrical effect is not being created, and it cannot be EMP'd until the electrical effect is being used. So it feels, and maybe this is, this probably is a good thing for Clash, but it really feels like a terrible, weird interaction from the Thatcher point of view. And it's a myth I hope they actually change in the future. Now, I think we're getting close to the end, so we're just going to do some quick fire. So let's start with Scopos, of course, 2 robots. So one robot that is active cannot be EMP'd at all, unless, just like a player, they're on their phone, then they can be EMP'd, but it only affects them just like a player would. And then from Thatcher's point of view, you cannot detect the active player unless they're on the phone as usual, but it doesn't have a phone icon, it has an actual icon for Scopos, and you can detect and EMP the inactive drone. For Warden, if he has his glasses active, you will be able to detect him with a simple dot and EMP him. His ability will then be disabled for 15 seconds, and when he switches them back on, you will be able to see them as little glasses icons in your scanner. This is exactly the same interaction with Solus, and then of course be noted that on Dual Front you can have attackers on the enemy team, and as a result, you can also detect attackers with this gadget if you're playing Dual Front, so the amount of interactions possible are quite mind-blowing. And then you might have noticed that the EMP effect switches off the lights. So this is a current feature with the already existing version of Thatcher with his EMP grenades, but it feels like they've really cranked it up with this new version. For the most part, it does not impact gameplay, but there is some rooms on some maps where it honestly gets very dark. So I'm waiting for this Thatcher Remaster to hit live servers to see if this in any way actually impacts gameplay or can be used tactically. It looks cool, but I don't know if it's really that useful. It might actually be better for defenders who are already hiding in the map, as they'll be even more camouflaged in the dark. And that brings us to the conclusion of this video, and honestly there's not too many surprises in here, and if you go into the new season with simply the thought that okay, this disables gadgets and it detects gadgets, you're 99% of the way there, and the only one that really could potentially get you killed is that Clash interaction, which I think is going to be frustrating. And if I had to guess, I think it'll probably get changed. So yeah, that is the Thatcher Remaster. I think it's been a rather boring video because it's essentially just an EMP cannon attached to IQ's gadget, and it mostly works how you think it would. But saying that, this is by far the best remaster they've ever made, and I think it's almost perfect. Now we do have to wait for it to hit live servers to really be sure, because maybe it'll be OP, maybe it'll be weak, could be anywhere, but it seems more interesting, more fun, and it still appears to have the soul of Thatcher built into it, and it just feels like I'm still playing the same operator, but he literally did decide to get himself an upgrade. So anyway guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.